There is a kind of Acadian family name, the kind the old Acadian families of the Atlantic coast carried, that can survive a burned house, a prison ship, and an ocean crossing and still end up, generations later, on a mailbox that has nothing else in common with the people who first carried it. Most surnames are just labels, passed down without much thought. But a small number of them are survivors in a much stranger sense. They are the last visible trace of a population that a government once tried, quite deliberately, to make disappear. If the name you carry happens to be one of about 15 very specific ones, there is a real chance it belongs to that second category. Not just an old French-sounding name, an Acadian name. A name that made it through one of the most calculated removals of a civilian population in North American history, an event the French call le grand dérangement, that split families on purpose, loaded them onto different ships on purpose, and scattered them across 2 continents so that they could never simply walk home and rebuild what they had lost. Most people who carry these names have no idea any of this happened. They know the name is a little hard to spell, a little hard for teachers to pronounce, maybe vaguely French. What almost nobody explains is that the name itself now functions like a genetic fingerprint, something genealogists and geneticists use as an actual research tool, because it can point backward with startling precision, not just to a country, but to a handful of small villages on the western coast of France, and forward to a documented medical and genetic signature carried by their descendants today. So today, we are going to find out what your surname might actually be hiding, if it happens to be on this list. Because the honest answer is not simply French ancestry, and it is not just an old immigration story. It is far more specific and far more brutal than that. Before we get into it, hold 3 questions in your head. Why would a colonial government go to the trouble of loading entire families onto separate ships and deliberately scattering them across different colonies instead of simply leaving them alone or driving them off in one direction? Why did a population that was broken apart on purpose, mixed among strangers so it could never reorganize as a community, end up more genetically identifiable today than almost any other group of European descent in North America? And why do modern genetic genealogists use this exact short list of family names as an instrument, almost like a tool, precise enough to sort a person's ancestry down to a handful of parishes in Western France? Every one of those has a real answer, and they connect. Hold that. Let's start with who we are actually talking about, because the story does not begin with a deportation. It begins about a century and a half earlier, with a small number of French families, likely only a few hundred households in total, who crossed the Atlantic in the early 1600s and settled a stretch of coastal marshland in what is now Nova Scotia and the surrounding maritime region. They called their new home Acadia. The Acadians had lived on this territory since the founding of Port Royal in 1605 by Pierre du Gaudet and Samuel de Champlain, the first permanent European settlement north of Florida. Most of these founding families came from a tight cluster of regions in western France, places like Poitou, Aunis, and Saintonge. And because the colony stayed small and somewhat isolated for generations, those founding families intermarried heavily with one another. Cousins married cousins. Neighboring farms became linked by blood again and again. In genetic terms, this is called a founder population, a group descended from a small number of ancestors, and it leaves a very particular signature in the DNA of everyone who comes after. By the middle of the 1700s, that community, the Acadians, had grown into a settled, self-sufficient farming society, and it had become a problem for the British Empire, which had taken formal control of the region but did not trust the loyalty of a French-speaking Catholic population living inside it. The Treaty of Utrecht, signed April 11, 1713, had ceded Acadia from France to Britain, creating a loyalty crisis that would simmer for decades. In the year 1755, British colonial authorities began what is now known as the Great Expulsion, or le grand dérangement. The immediate trigger came in June 1755, when British forces captured Fort Beauséjour and found 270 Acadian militiamen inside. It was not a single event, but a campaign that lasted until 1764, with some deportations continuing as late as 1778. It was a campaign that stretched across roughly a decade. Soldiers burned Acadian villages and farms to the ground so there would be nothing to return to. Families were rounded up at gunpoint, marched to the coast, and loaded onto transport ships, and here's the detail that should stop you. The most populated settlement, Grand Pre, became the primary embarkation site where 2,200 Acadians were deported in 1755 alone. Lieutenant Colonel John Winslow was the British officer who personally oversaw those deportations at Grand Pre, reading the expulsion order aloud to Acadian men he had assembled in the church before locking the doors. Husbands were frequently separated from wives and children from parents, put onto entirely different vessels bound for entirely different destinations on purpose, specifically so that families could not reunite and rebuild a community once they landed. In July 1755, Acadians had refused an unqualified oath of allegiance to Britain, precipitating their imprisonment and the deportation order issued by Lieutenant Governor Charles Lawrence on July 28th. Not every Acadian went quietly. Leaders like Joseph Broussard, known as Beausoleil, led fierce guerrilla resistance campaigns against the British forces in the years surrounding the expulsion, refusing to surrender long after most of his community had been loaded onto ships. He would eventually lead a group of survivors all the way to Louisiana, where he became one of the founding figures of the Cajun community. Those ships scattered Acadian families across the British American colonies, from Massachusetts down to Georgia, where many arrived as unwanted refugees with no legal standing and no land. Between 1755 and 1764, 10,000 to 13,000 Acadians were deported, out of a pre-war population of roughly 14,100. Others were shipped directly to England or to France itself, a country many of them had never actually seen since their families had been in North America for generations. Some landed on Belle-Île-en-Mer, a French island off the coast of Brittany, where Acadian surname records show a significant concentration of deportees who tried to rebuild there before many eventually moved on. Some ended up in the Caribbean, on islands like what is now Haiti, in conditions that killed a significant portion of the deportees through disease and starvation before they ever reached a permanent home. From 1755 to 1763, more than 7,000 Acadians, nearly half the population, perished, with nearly 5,000 dying from disease, shipwreck, or battle. And a large number of survivors eventually made their way, over years and sometimes decades, down to Spanish-controlled Louisiana, where their descendants would become the people known today as the Cajuns, a name that is itself simply a worn-down pronunciation of the word Acadian. Acadians were allowed to return to the maritime provinces after 1764, following the Treaty of Paris of 1763, which ended the 7 Years' War and formally reshuffled colonial territories. Though returning Acadians found their original lands had been settled by New England planters. Here is where the second question from the start gets its answer, and it is genuinely strange. Deliberately breaking apart a community should have destroyed its genetic identity along with its political and cultural one. Scattered, intermarried with strangers, absorbed into new colonies, an exiled population should blend into the background within a couple of generations and become genetically invisible. Instead, the opposite happened. In the specific pockets where large numbers of Acadian refugees regrouped, particularly in southern Louisiana, but also along parts of the maritime coast where some families eventually returned, the deportees kept marrying within their own surviving community rather than the surrounding population. That was not sentiment. It was often forced by language, religion, and simple geography, since Acadian refugees frequently ended up isolated together in marshland and frontier areas that other settlers did not want. At Grand Pre, Acadians had developed a marshland reclamation technology using dikes, called aboiteaux, that allowed them to claim an estimated 13,000 acres of fertile land from the tidal sea. That same practical relationship with difficult terrain followed them into exile, and the communities that formed in Louisiana's Bayou country replicated the geographic isolation that had shaped the original colony. The founder population effect from the 1600s did not fade. It was reinforced, generation after generation, inside the diaspora itself. That reinforcement is exactly why the surviving list of surnames works so well as a genetic marker today. Names like Leblanc, Melanson, Hébert, Landry, Thibodeau, Doiron, Comeau, Boudreau, Richard, Arsenault, Bourque, Cormier, Robichaud, Gaudet, and Broussard trace back overwhelmingly to that same small founding cluster of French families. If your family carries one of these, genetic genealogists can often place your paternal or maternal line with real precision back into Acadian parish records. And in many cases, DNA testing companies can flag a distinct regional signal tied to exactly this population, separate from the broader French or French-Canadian category most people expect to see. And there is harder proof than surname records alone. Medical genetics has independently documented the same founder effect from another direction entirely. A form of Niemann-Pick disease, a rare inherited lipid storage disorder, was identified specifically in families from Nova Scotia's Acadian communities and is still referred to in the medical literature as the Nova Scotia type. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's epic poem Evangeline, A Tale of Acadia, published in 1847 and set in Grand Pré, popularized the Acadian story and became a rallying point for descendants. Separately, a distinct form of Usher syndrome, which causes combined hearing and vision loss, appears at a documented, unusually high rate specifically among Cajun families in Louisiana who descend from the deportation. Neither of these conditions shows up at anything like that frequency in the general population. Geneticists trace both patterns to the same narrow founding population from the 1600s, carried forward through generations of intermarriage that the deportation, ironically, helped preserve rather than erase. Now here is the twist hiding underneath all of this, the upside I promised you at the start, because that same founder population was not purely French to begin with. In the earliest decades of the Acadian colony, well before the deportation, there was genuine intermarriage between French settlers and the Indigenous Mi'kmaq people of the region, whose territory the colonists had settled on and depended on for survival. The Mi'kmaq chief Hébert had famously established an early alliance with the French at Port Royal in the colony's founding years, and the cultural exchange that followed went deeper than politics. For a long time, later generations of Acadian and Cajun descendants downplayed or simply forgot this, partly out of the social pressures of later centuries. Today, DNA testing is quietly reopening that door. A noticeable number of people carrying these exact 15 surnames, when they test, find a small but genuine trace of Indigenous North American ancestry, sitting alongside their expected French signal, a real inheritance from those earliest unions, resurfacing generations later in a spit tube. Now, an honest caution, because this subject invites overconfidence. A surname is a strong clue, not a verdict. Some of these same family names exist among French settlers who were never Acadian at all, and some Acadian descendants changed, anglicized, or lost their original surname somewhere along the way, especially after landing in English-speaking colonies where clerks simply wrote down whatever they thought they heard. A shared name is a reason to look closer, using actual genealogical records and a DNA test that reports specific regional ancestry, not a guarantee on its own. Treat it as the first thread to pull, not the whole rope. If one of these names is sitting in your family tree, or if this story matches something your grandparents used to mention and then quietly stop talking about, put it in the comments along with which name it is and where your family eventually settled. I read everyone, and honestly, some of the best leads for future episodes come directly from those comments. And if you want a sense of just how many descendants are still out there actively searching, the Congrès Mondial Acadien, the World Acadian Congress, has drawn crowds estimated at as many as 200,000 people to its reunion gatherings, descendants from across North America and France, gathering around exactly these surnames and exactly this history. And if a forced migration hiding inside a family name got your attention, the next video follows this same bloodline forward into the population it became after the exile ended, the Cajun communities of Louisiana, and what their DNA reveals about who actually survived the crossing. Subscribe if you want that when it goes up, because this list of 15 names is only the beginning of that story.